Every year, when roster cut-down day arrives, the NFL becomes a storm of emotions. For players, it's either the moment their dreams continue or the day they end. For coaches and front offices, it's a balancing act of talent, contracts, injuries, and long-term strategy. And for fans, especially Detroit Lions fans who are riding a wave of optimism, it's both stressful and fascinating. This year's cuts gave us more than just a list of names. They told a story. A story about where this team is headed, how deep the roster really is, and how tough the decisions have become in Detroit. Let's start with one of the biggest surprises, Dan Skipper. Skipper has been a warrior for this team. He's played guard, he's played tackle, he's been that sixth offensive lineman who could line up as a tight end and give the Lions flexibility. He's been the definition of a grinder, never flashy, but always reliable. So when the Lions let him go, it turned heads. Why move on from someone who's been so dependable? The answer isn't about what Skipper did wrong, it's about what others did right. The cut signals confidence in Giovanni Mano and Jamarco Jones, younger players who bring more athletic upside. Mano has taken his lumps in camp. He's raw, he's inconsistent, and he's been beaten badly at times. But he's also shown flashes of strength and agility that Skipper simply doesn't have anymore. Detroit seems to believe that with more reps and development, Mano can surpass Skipper. Think about what that means for this roster. When a player like Dan Skipper, a respected veteran who has filled multiple roles, no longer makes the team, it's not because the Lions are suddenly desperate. It's because their depth has grown to the point where younger talent is pushing veterans aside. That's what winning organizations do. Still, don't completely rule out Skipper's return. The Lions have a history of cutting veterans only to bring them back once certain players are moved to injured reserve. If that happens, Skipper could still be part of the 2024 journey. But if he's not, his departure is both a thank you for past service and a signal that the Lions' offensive line is deeper than it has been in years. Now let's flip to the defensive side of the ball, where the cut of Nate Lynn raised eyebrows. The edge position looked strong early in camp, but injuries to Josh Pascal and Hassanin changed the equation. Releasing Lynn left fans asking, wait, are we really going into the season this thin at edge? This is where Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are playing chess while the rest of us watch checkers. The Lions may trust Keith Cooper and Mywingo to handle more snaps than fans realize. Or they could be preparing to scoop up a veteran released by another team during cutdowns. Remember, every franchise is cutting from 90 to 53 players. Across the league, there will be talented defensive ends suddenly available, and Detroit has both the cap space and roster flexibility to grab one. Cutting Nate Lynn doesn't mean the Lions are reckless. It means they're confident that reinforcements are out there, or that their young depth can survive until Pascal and others return. It's the same philosophy they used last year with wide receivers. Take a risk on thin depth, then add players when opportunities arise. Already, this roster cut period has revealed something important. The Lions are no longer clinging to veterans out of fear. They're making bold, sometimes uncomfortable decisions because the standard has risen. Quarterbacks, depth questions, and the Brad Holmes approach, no roster cut conversation, is complete without talking quarterbacks. The Lions' decision to cut Hendon Hooker was both stunning and strangely logical. Hooker, a third-round pick, was seen by many as the potential quarterback of the future. Drafted out of Tennessee, he had the arm, the poise, and the mobility to one day step in behind Jared Goff. But injuries, inconsistency, and stalled development made his future cloudy. Cutting him wasn't just about his play, it was about Holmes' willingness to admit when something isn't working. Think about how rare that is. Too many general managers hold on to high draft picks far longer than they should, simply to justify the investment. Holmes took the opposite path. If you're not helping us win now or projecting to help soon, we move on. It's ruthless, yes, but it's also what strong organizations do. The Lions can still try to bring Hooker back on the practice squad, but the message is clear. The quarterback depth chart belongs to Jared Goff and Teddy Bridgewater, with no safety net for the future right now. That creates both urgency and opportunity. Urgency because Goff must stay healthy. Bridgewater is a capable backup, but not a long-term starter. Opportunity because Detroit will continue searching for its quarterback of the future, whether in next year's draft or through another route. And it's not just Hooker. Roderick Martin, another recent third-round pick, was also let go. Once again, Holmes showed he won't waste time forcing a fit. If you can't crack this roster, you don't stick around just because of where you were drafted. What does all this mean? It means the Lions roster has reached a point where draft status doesn't guarantee safety. Only performance does. It's a culture shift from the old days in Detroit, when draft pedigree bought players years of chances. Now, if you can't keep up, you're out. This brings us to a broader truth about the 2024 Lions. Depth is both their greatest strength and their most delicate balancing act. On the offensive line, depth is pushing out respected veterans. On the defensive line, injuries are forcing tough choices. At wide receiver, the return of Jameson Williams combined with the steadiness of Amon-Ra St. Brown makes the room strong, but still dependent on young guys developing. Every position group has its own story, but they all connect back to one thing. The Lions aren't just building a roster. They're building a standard. And while we break all of this down, let me pause for a second and talk to you, the Lions fans who make this journey worth it. If you love deep analysis, if you love staying ahead of every move this team makes, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the conversation in the comments. This channel isn't just about news, it's about building a community of fans who live and breathe Detroit Lions football. And trust me, the season ahead is going to give us plenty to talk about. Now, back to the cuts. Another player worth mentioning is Mitchell Ade, released from the defensive line group. Like Skipper, he's the kind of player who does the dirty work, fills in quietly, and doesn't get noticed until he's gone. His release underscores how loaded the Lions' defensive interior is. Between Alam McNeil, Levi Onwuzurike, and other rotational pieces, the Lions had to let go of players who would have made rosters elsewhere. The same applies to Ian Kenny, a safety who had shown flashes but didn't crack the final 53. That's not a knock on Kenny. It's a reflection of how far Detroit's secondary has come. A few years ago, the Lions' defensive backfield was a liability. Now, it's so competitive that talented players are being pushed aside. This is the big picture fans need to see. Roster cuts are no longer about survival. They're about sharpening the blade. Every move Holmes and Campbell make is designed to push the roster closer to championship caliber. The bigger picture, what comes next, and final thoughts roster cuts are never just about names on a list. They're about strategy, timing, and vision. For the Lions, the 2024 Cutdown Day revealed three major themes. 1. Depth is finally real. Players like Dan Skipper and Ian Kenny aren't gone because they failed. They're gone because the team has outgrown them. That's a sign of progress. 2. Holmes won't cling to mistakes. Whether it's Hendon Hooker or Broderick Martin, the Lions GM won't let past draft picks hold back the present roster. That honesty is refreshing and necessary. 3. The roster is still fluid. Just because cuts are made doesn't mean the 53-man is locked. Expect the Lions to explore the waiver wire, target defensive ends, and possibly make veteran additions. The front office has money to spend and isn't afraid to use it. Fans should also remember this. The Lions are now at a point where cutdown day is less about panic and more about strategy. In the past, it felt like Detroit was scrambling to fill holes. Now, it feels like they're shaping a contender. That's a massive cultural change. And let's not overlook the human side. For every player cut, it's the end, or at least a pause, in a lifelong dream. Dan Skipper's story is inspirational, and if this is his final moment in Detroit, he leaves with the respect of teammates and fans alike. The same goes for Hooker, Martin, and the rest. These cuts aren't failures, they're reflections of just how far the Lions roster has climbed. Final thoughts: the 2024 Detroit Lions are not the same old Lions. These roster cuts prove it. They're deeper, smarter, and tougher than ever before. When a team can release veterans who once filled major roles, when they can cut recent draft picks without hesitation, when they can trust that their depth will hold up even through injuries, that's when you know they're building something real. The message is clear. This team is built for January football. Every move, every cut, every risk is about preparing for the only thing that matters: winning in the postseason. So, yes, roster cuts are hard. Yes, they hurt. But they also tell us something we've been waiting years to hear. The Detroit Lions are no longer desperate. They're dangerous. And as we head into the season, one thing is certain: this roster is ready to compete with anybody in the NFL.